Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that welcome music today for our presentation. And this is what Chew on This, a panel discussion that we'll be using to celebrate Black History Month. I'm Beth Garlock and chair of the Auburn Hills Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice Committee. And our committee is really excited to be co-sponsoring this webinar event today with the OCC Black Student Union. Today's discussion is titled Celebrating the Family and Reflections from Three Generations. The format for the webinar will be that the panelists, the moderators, and the speakers will be visible and audible on the screen. However, the audience video and microphones will be muted for minimal distractions today. And we request that all participants please use the Q&A feature to ask questions or make comments for our panelists, and we'll try to get to as many as possible after the discussion. Our coming together today is meant to focus on and take the perceptions of the Black family unit and how it has not historically been well represented in the media or in public spaces in the past. And today focus on real narratives from Black families by generation. And through our chosen topics and themes, the panelists will give us some insight and sense of how things have changed and maybe how things have not changed. And this is where we hope real conversation and understanding can begin. And now I'd like to introduce my co-moderator, Ms. Desiree Tate, Vice President of OCC's Black Student Union.
Hello, everyone. Sorry about this. Some difficulties.
While we're waiting for Desiree to jump on here and join us here, I can go ahead and introduce our panelists for today. So first we have Professor Quincy Norwood, and he's an English faculty member at OCC and an advisor to the Black Student Union. And Mr. Norwood is going to be representing Generation X. If he wants to give a wave there. And then next, please welcome Mr. Tom Kimball. And he's the President Emeritus of Michigan AARP and a member of the OCC Foundation Board. And Mr. Kimball is going to be representing the baby boomer generation for our panel discussion. And then finally, please welcome Anastasia Clark. And Anastasia is the President of the Black Student Union, and she's going to be representing Generation Z.
Okay. Our format would include questions from 5 themes: evolution of family structure, education, entertainment, mental health, and social change. Myself and Beth will ask questions, and then each panelist will have the chance to answer. Okay, the first question is from evolution of family structure. What was your family structure like? How do you feel family structure have changed through generations? Do you think any social issues affected changing family dynamics?
That's a good question. Perhaps I can start it off if you don't mind. All right. And I'll be speaking from the viewpoint of a baby boomer. And some of you will ask, well, what's a baby boomer? A baby boomer is anyone that you know, all right, that's between the years of 60 and 74, all right? So how did it get to be known as baby boomers? Well, that's simple. When World War II was over, all the guys rushed home to be with their families like my dad did a couple of months after the war. And 9 months later, there was a big boom, and I was one of them. All right. And that was the beginning of the baby boomers. And let me share some thoughts with you about how life was back then, and perhaps provide an opportunity for you to look at the difference as Quincy speaks and as we go to Generation Z. The Black family structure was nuclear when baby boomers were being raised. 80% of every family had a father, a mother, and the kids. And that's compared to today's, where only about 60% of Afro-American families have a father, mother, a two-parent household. We had the resilient belief in the importance of having a very strong family unit. The whole family worked together, they played together, and they worshiped together. Fathers worked, mothers stayed at home to raise the kids, and discipline was an absolute. If you got out of hand, there was some discipline, all right? And during those days, very few kids were born out of wedlock versus the 70% of Black children born out of wedlock today. And back then, if you got a young lady pregnant, you were going to marry her. And her father was there with his shotgun to make sure that you would marry her. And that's how we got the old phrase, shotgun wedding. And it's my belief that if some of the millennials, Quincy, would bring out some of those old shotguns and dust them off, some of the issues that we have in dysfunctional families and fragmented families would go away, because we'd have more marriages and we'd have more families staying together. We also value the thought that the village has the responsibility of raising kids. Extended families of grandparents, of aunts and uncles, and even the non-relative families of neighbors and friends all work together to raise kids, to raise these baby boomers back in the day. And we valued the Black culture back then, our mores and social norms and folklores, our music, talking about our legends and other jokes, all right, were all part of an exciting family life back in the day. Just like the song we heard while we were waiting, "We Are Family," that was a baby boomer Black family back in the day. Yes, to your question, there were some social issues that affected the Black family dynamics then. I can think of a few. Integration impacted us. The government's enhancement of a welfare state where so many people got on welfare. Laws that changed the way we discipline our kids had a tremendous impact on the Black family unit. And more than anything else, I think the unfair criminal justice system that incarcerated so many of our Black fathers had a very detrimental impact on the structure and the dynamics of a Black family.
Okay, thank you. Norwood, would you like to answer now?
Yes. I second, the tail end of what Mr. Kimball was saying, in that, certain social aspects of our nation were driving like maybe a shift in family structure. For part of my life, I was raised in a two-parent household, with mother and father, but, maybe when I became a preteen, things didn't work out. So, and I think that was the story of a lot of our parents, in Generation X, and that has sort of transitioned into the way we kind of looked at relationships. You know, some of us were married, some of us are in like co-parenting situations with, you know, the other parent of our children, if you will. So there's certainly been, oh, you know, grandparents, you know, came into play as well. You know, many of us were either raised by grandparents or, you know, raised kind of in close proximity, you know, to grandparents. The notion of it taking a village still kind of existed, but things became fractured a little bit when, I don't know, sometimes people will say, you know, I'm just going to take care of mine. So there's kind of that dynamic where part of it is, you know, it takes a village, but then it's also the mindset of, you know, I'm just going to take care of, it's a saying like my four and no more. All right. So it is certainly just a shift in, you know, the family dynamic. I think also we as Generation Xers kind of saw that maybe our parents and the notion of like a long and strong marriage, maybe that wasn't always the truth, you know, when you got beneath the surface. I know many of us in Generation X, we'll just say we found out family secrets later in life. All right. So yeah, that's what I have to say about just a shift in family dynamic.
Anna, would you like to answer the question?
Right. So for me, I guess it's a little different because my family is very dysfunctional. Like, it's a mess. So, like Norwood, I was raised in a two-parent household up until probably middle school, and then things kind of just fell apart. My parents got married and then divorced really quickly. But it was really just so they could kind of be there for me and my sister. They weren't really together for themselves anymore. It was just so, you know, they kind of had that, oh, two people can love each other and coexist, but it just turned to be toxic and just a horrible, it just turned to a very bad situation in some situations. So I guess it's kind of hard for me to answer the family structure question specifically because my situation was not, I don't know, stable, I guess. I really don't, I'm not sure, but looking at like my grandparents and stuff like that, you can see that them 60, 70-year marriages don't exist anymore. You know, my views on relationships are really messed up just because of, you know, what my parents went through and stuff like that. But you can kind of see where Gen X, because, you know, that's my parents' ages, you can see where it kind of, how they played a role with each other in their relationships. You can see where it's affecting our generation specifically because it just hardly exists anymore. All the people I know, nobody's married, everybody has kids. It's just, it's different. It's really different. Social change though, the only thing that's different for me, my grandparents, well, my grandmother really, she's not too big on the whole protesting thing just because she feels like we shouldn't have to be out here doing it. So we've kind of clashed and bumped heads with that. So I guess that kind of plays a role in, you know, how it, I don't know, it's just my family's a hot mess. There's no way to completely answer it. The everything, it's like everything that happens, it has some kind of impact on what goes on. So that's pretty much my answer.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that, all three of you. And we're going to move into the next topic theme area of education. And the question for the panelists is, what was your family's attitude toward education, and what role did equity play in where and how you and your family members were educated?
Okay, you know, the silent generation, which were the parents of the baby boomers, insisted that we have a good education. And that's probably because most of them went through this 1929 market crash, all right? And it was some difficult times during the Depression. So when they come out of that Depression, a lot of them suffered because they didn't have education. So they wanted more for us than they got for themselves. And education was right at the top. So they insisted that we would go through school, we would go to college. And I mean, kids didn't have a lot of choice in that decision that they would get an education. I mean, there were about three things that would have happened. One, when you graduated from high school, you go to college. Two, you could go to the armed services. Or three, you could get out of the house and get a job, but they weren't going to take care of you anymore. All right. So that was the belief and value. I mean, it beliefs and values of the family, Black family back in those days. So as the role that education equity played in the last part of your question, in the South, where I came from, Dallas, Texas, all the schools were segregated for K through 12. And even though they were separate, all right, they were supposed to be equal according to, you probably heard it, Brown versus the Board of Education, that says you can keep them apart, but you got to make them equal. But I can tell you today, we saw a lot of separate, but we never saw no equal, all right? And I'm gonna also tell you today that here in Oakland County in 2021, I see a lot of schools, not a lot, I see a few schools that are separate in terms of ethnicity, but they're still not equal in terms of the resources that they got. So from 1946 to 2001, I cannot say that I've seen a lot of change in terms of this equity question. And we need to do something about that. In terms of education, going to college, the problem was that there were no integrated colleges down in the South during that time. So if you wanted to get an education, you had to do one or two things. You had to leave the state, all right, come up north or go out west, or you had to go to a historically Black college or university. I chose to go to a Black college. Best thing I ever did.
Thank you.
I agree with a lot of what Mr. Kimball was saying. And just this past weekend, I was having a conversation with my mother in preparation for this event. And, you know, both of my parents were raised in Mississippi. All right, they attended separate, segregated schools, segregated pretty much everything, whether it was segregated by the letter of the law or segregated in deed. All right, and both of my parents, as you know, Mr. Kimball did, both of them attended an HBCU, Alcorn University, Lawrence, Mississippi. All right, and education was certainly stressed in my household. My mother is a retired teacher, so education, she enforced it because of that, but she also, she knew that she was raising, you know, two Black men, and getting an education was, in her mind, you know, going to keep us safe, you know, so to speak, and, you know, afford us, you know, certain opportunities. So my mother, you know, stressed education, and I think some of us in Generation X may have the experience of our parents wanting us to have a quote unquote good education. So some of us were sent to places where we weren't loved. All right. Like for my elementary school, middle school, I was in public school. You know, I had my friends, my circle of friends, people who look like me, teachers who look like me. But when I got to high school, my mom would say, you know what, I'm going to send you to a different school. And, you know, I picked up some great study skills, but the social aspect of that really was an issue. for me. And even in hindsight, as I reflect on it, it's more, of an issue. And just to go further with something Mr. Kimball was saying also, I think my generation is the last generation where we could kind of leave high school. For us, excuse me, in Michigan, in the Detroit area, we could catch on with one of the big three, if we didn't want to go to college or the military was there. And I think my generation also, there were just seeds of entrepreneurship, meaning like, I'm not going to go to college. I'm not going to get a trade, but I do have this idea for a business. All right. So I think maybe the seeds of that were planted, in my generation. And as far as equity, I also agree with Mr. Kimball. It's sometimes we see diversity on the surface, but I think when we go beneath it, especially when we look in terms of like economic diversity. All right. So I think sometimes we segregate, of course, by race, but I think oftentimes there's more of a segregation by class. All right. So there's certainly, not to discount progress that has been made, but there's, again, if we want to talk true equity in terms of education, we still have a long way to go in the marathon.
Thank you. Anna?
I think it's really similar for me. Like my grandma, she's from Texas. Both of them, both of my grandparents are from Texas and down south. So
Good.
really, her parents were what made her want to come, leave the South, come to Michigan just to get away from everything. Like you said, it was separate, but quote unquote equal. So they came to Michigan and they stayed in Detroit. After a while, they moved to Lansing after my parents were born. But it was really stressed that my grades are always good. I'm always, on time to class, stuff like that. Like I wasn't able to bring home anything less than a B for like all of my life. I would get in trouble. They weren't playing about my education. My mom did not play that. But both of my parents were high school dropouts. So they wanted to stress that, their lives weren't all that, living, paycheck to paycheck isn't the greatest. And I had to see it firsthand just growing up. And I mean, they had me when they were really young. So they just really shoved that down my throat. Like, you have to get an education, like you said, either go to the army or get a job, but I'm not helping you. But I wanted to go to the military originally because I didn't see the value in the education, because I just didn't care when I was younger. But they told me no, because I have my own health problems and I had to figure out what I was going to do, because it's like, okay, I'm 17, I'm on my own, I can't take care of myself, I don't know what to do. I've never had to, this wasn't something that was forced onto me. So I went to college, tried it for a year and a half. I didn't do too well, I dropped out, but coming back, I still have that like heavy support. Sometimes I get to talking with my mom, like, I'm really tired of school. This is a lot of work. I'm stressed out. I don't know what to do. I feel like this is forever. I should have been done, just kind of comparing myself to other people. And she just keeps reminding me, like, at the end of the day, my education is what's going to open up everything for me. Like, I want a better future. I want to provide for, my future family one day. And I can't do that the way that she did. She sees it. She knows it. She dealt with it firsthand. So it's like really kind of, it's like I'm doing this for me, but I'm also doing it for my mom, because nobody really in my family has a college degree. They all got their GEDs. Nobody really got even a high school diploma. So it's like equity really wasn't an issue for my generation. It was more or less go where you matter. But like y'all said, the resources are really, really bad. I went to Lansing public schools, and I could tell you already now, they're horrible. They're trash. I mean, I know so many people are like, oh, Detroit schools are really, really bad. They're the worst, whatever. They're not. I can guarantee they're not. There was stuff that people I met at Wayne State knew that I had never even heard of. I'm still learning stuff to this day that people in different cities have known since elementary school. Like I really feel like I was deprived in my education, and it's just the resources that we choose to not use. It's sad. I really think that we should really heavily press how important education is to people, because it's really, really bad just how unsteady scores and stuff like that. Education is across the generation and the border at even, we go transgenerational, intergenerational, everything is just really different with what people know, how they learn it, when they learn it. So it wasn't so much equity as a personal thing for me, but you can definitely see where there's, deficiencies.
Thank you.
Okay, moving to our next category, we have entertainment. Which prominent television, movie, poetry, books, music, or theatrical theme do you think most shaped your Black family's mindset, and how?
Thank you. Good question there, young lady. Uh, there were not very many Black faces on television during my early years. And they really didn't appear on television until the 70s and the 80s. Those that did, like the Amos and Andy show, really didn't present a very good mindset for young Black men to want to model after. In the 70s, things picked up a little bit. We got Good Times, all right? And then in the 80s, we got the Cosby Show. So things start progressively moving up from the baby boomers to the millennials when they came in. Some shows start happening. But today, I got to say that today is much better than it ever was in the past. I mean, it's hard to pick up a TV channel or a show without seeing some levels of diversity and inclusion. And that's a great thing. That's a tremendous improvement over what it was back in the 50s and 60s. To the issue of music, now I tell you, music has always been big within the Black family. The voices of Mahalia Jackson in her spirituals, Billie Holiday when she sang the blues, it spoke to our souls and it spoke to our ways of life. The melodic voice of Nat King Cole was so sweet and so mellow, it would blow you away, all right? Miles Davis blew his trumpet like Gabriel blows his horn up in heaven. And when James Brown sang, "I'm Black and I'm Proud," it significantly changed the way Black people looked at themselves across the country. The mindset before that song was the blacker your skin, the uglier you were. After that song, we began to cherish our Blackness with the purpose, the dignity, and pride it so much deserved. Back then and even now, when we sang James Weldon Jones' "Lift Every Voice and Sing," which is also the Black national anthem, it speaks to our struggle back in my baby boomer youth. It speaks to our millennials now, and it speaks to our generation of X's and Z's for the years to come. Now, when it comes to books, I can remember reading The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. And that really comes to my mind and the impact that it had on me. It tells the story of a nameless Black man navigating through a white world, and eventually he isolates himself from society to protect him from the powers that be. This story, and my teacher said, "Well, how was this story an allegory, Kimball?" I didn't know what an allegory story was then, but now I understand what it is. It's an opportunity for the character to live really a much broader issue than what you see in the book. And in this case, the character was really a nation of Black people going through so much turmoil and so much pain And in the eyes of the white community, they were invisible, all right? And I got to tell you that sometimes in my career, in my corporate career, I felt invisible, all right? And I suspect that a lot of young people today, even though they're trying to do the best they can, they still are invisible to other people. So we come a long way, but we still got a long way to go in terms of not being the invisible man like I read that book. I have to tell you that in that career of mine, there was a great article in the Wall Street Journal, in this past June's Wall Street Journal, where they featured me telling my story of coming up in corporate America and how oftentimes I felt like the guy in that book felt. So if you get a chance, go back and pick up research the Wall Street Journal, June 19, and you'll see Kimball in an article there.
Okay, thank you. We'll do so. Nora, would you like to answer now?
I mean, I'm an 80s baby, so Cosby Show. Right. Cosby Show, A Different World, certainly A Different World, and then movies like School Days, and then of course my parents' influence. I decided, at a young age, I was going to an HBCU. All right, and I actually went to a couple of them, but that's a longer story. But yeah, Cosby Show, and then Good Times, the Jeffersons. I really liked the Jeffersons because I just like George. He wasn't afraid to tell it how it is, and he was an entrepreneur. All right. What else was it? Oh, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was kind of a non-traditional family where you have this nuclear family, but you also have the Will Smith character who's from the outside. So, and then there were a lot of shows that were kind of under the radar, like South Central, and other shows that Cosby Show set this kind of like ideal family, doctor, lawyer, great kids who never get in any real trouble. But there were other shows that were more, I'm not gonna say a more realistic depiction, but just another narrative. I think we get so caught up in like the Black experience, but we kind of have to understand that there are Black experiences, like layers to our experiences. So it's often reflected in our art and entertainment. And as far as music, I'm also a hip hop child, but I think hip hop culture, since sampling is such a key aspect of early music, it put me on to like a lot of other genres of music, and all of the music that Mr. Kimball mentioned when he was speaking, I came to that music through hip hop. I learned to love the music that came before me because I heard it first in a different way where there's somebody saying some words or some lyrics over this beat, but then it was like let me go back to this original source. And then also I just grew up around music like albums everywhere. Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, Richard Pryor albums, that taught me how to say some bad words when I was little. Red Fox. So, art, entertainment was certainly a part of my upbringing. And then, son of a teacher, so, reading was always, a fact of my life. And I remember, Anna, you mentioned that bad grades would get you in trouble. Well, how about this? When I got in trouble, my punishment was a book report from a mom. All right. Yes, I see that face. All right. But Richard Wright, okay, Native Son, Black Boy. These are books that kind of like influenced me as a child. Autobiography of Malcolm X, certainly seminal reading, works of James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, one of my favorite authors. And then the list goes on and on. My mom is just put that seed in me when I was younger, like read. Okay, read whatever you can get your hands on. And it's I'm grateful that it's a habit that I still have today. So Reading, music, arts, entertainment. I think, these are just, sort of a normal part of the culture, that I grew up in, and certainly an influence. Even, to a certain extent, like the way I dress today, my students, they say, my students say, like, why are you dressed like that? And I'm like, this is the way I've always dressed. Like, this is how people of my generation typically dress. All right, because of just the influence of hip hop culture, so to speak. So yeah. And you get a book. You're not my student anymore, but you get a book report for laughing at me.
I'm sorry. That's hilarious. But I think it's the same, you guys really mentioned the same TV shows that's still around. We still watching Cosby Show. We still got the everything, honestly. And then now we have the more modern Blackish, Mixed-ish, all that good stuff. But to me, I'm not really the biggest fan of those because it's just, I don't know, it's not the same as what it used to be. I'm more, classic Black sitcom, stuff like that. But as far as it influencing, I mean, like Norma said, it's like it kind of influenced, what you dress, stuff like that. But it's not so much of your entire family is based off of what you see on TV. That's definitely not it. That's definitely not it. Music also really, really huge in my family. My dad, I mean, I love my hip hop, 70s, 80s, 90s, don't play. My dad always had Wu-Tang. I was just listening to Bone Thugs and Harmony earlier. Like, it's just like these things are kind of you grow up listening to, and it's so much, it's just for the culture, it's not so much just it doesn't only shape you individually, but it welcomes you, it connects you with other people that are just like you. So I think that's what's, the biggest thing about, the TV shows we watch, the music we listen to, how we dress, what we look like, stuff like that, all of that just, it's, I don't want to say it's part of your identity because you still, grow up in your own experiences, you have your own, you become yourself, but the way that they depict the Black experience, I think is it does a pretty good job in certain shows. The only thing with entertainment now that kind of annoys me is I'm so tired of Black trauma. So tired of Black trauma. Like, that's not the only Black experience. I promise we're happy people. I promise we can have fun. We know how to laugh. There's joy. There's good things. But a lot of, what you see, for me, it was like entertainment also came with social media as I grew up. You guys didn't really have the internet and stuff like that. So that's also another piece of my entertainment is just the way you see the portrayal of Black people, on the internet is just, there's negatives and positives, but if you're looking at like the news and stuff like that, you're mainly going to get a negative depiction of what Black people are. And then shaping that off of one thing as a whole, it kind of, in a way, destroys the Black image because people like to tie a whole group of Black people to Black Lives Matter just because they see a whole group on TV or something like that. And it's just like, it's nice to have this entertainment, but I wish people didn't always take it so seriously. I think that's my biggest thing.
Thank you all for those great responses about your experience with entertainment. And in regards to mental health, what kinds of experiences have most impacted Black families' health and mental health, and how has it impacted families? We'll start with Mr. Kimball.
In my youth, there was very little attention paid to mental health in the Black community. In fact, we were not very open to acknowledging psychological problems at all. The belief was that if you weren't in the sanatorium, there was nothing wrong with you. You were just acting a fool or acting crazy. That's what we'd say back in those days. Matter of fact, growing up, we never even used the word mental health. If we had a problem, we felt that we had a problem, we just had to accept it and roll on. We never heard words like bipolarism, like anxiety attacks, like major depressive disorders. Those words were foreign to the Black family back when I was growing up. If we saw someone with those symptoms, we would easily say, "Oh, they're just an alcoholic. They're on drugs." If they were looking depressed, what we call depressed today, we would just say, "Oh, they're just a sad person." So we didn't give a lot of. There wasn't a lot of influence, knowledge about mental health in those days. Matter of fact, when I think about it, you know, if a person was acting with symptoms of mental health, we would just normally say, "Oh, that's a weak person. They are just failing people. All right, they just can't make it in life." And but how wrong was that? How wrong? And how many people back then suffered and just were ignored. And when I look at the statistics today and see that over 20% of us seniors have mental issues that aren't being resolved, I become very sad. And I know that we have to do a whole lot more than we've done in the past to deal with them. So many baby boomers are isolated in their own homes because they have mental issues. Too many of our seniors, baby boomers, are impoverished. They're incarcerated. They're homeless, and they're fighting substance abuse because they aren't getting treated for their mental illness. And I'm very excited to see that Quincy's generation and Generation X and Z's are doing much more, and they are going to the doctors trying to get help, like my generation never had the opportunity to do.
Thank you. Mr. Norwood?
I agree with that. I think my generation started having those conversations. I remember one of my my favorite albums, Notorious Big, Ready to Die. And here's the successful rapper, but he has a song on his album called Suicidal Thoughts. And, you know, in the song, you know, he kind of talks about, you know, just being depressed. And just to hear someone who has like all the outward signs of being successful, you know, having these dark thoughts, you know, that kind of, a lot of us say, you know what, maybe not to this extent, but, you know, I feel like something isn't right and maybe I should talk to someone about this. Now, were we as proactive as the current generation? I don't think so. One thing I admire about you know, millennials and Gen Z persons is this generation is kind of normalizing getting help, meaning like it's not really a big deal to reach out to someone. And I think my generation, especially when we talk in terms of Blackness, and to go even further, like when we talk in terms of like masculinity, we had this, there's still kind of that stigma of, you know, if you say you have some mental health issues, oh, you're weak or crazy, touched, special. These are terms we use to kind of describe things that we didn't want to, I guess, really want to talk about in publicly. And I think with my generation as well, a lot of our parents and guardians kind of use church as like this one size fits all remedy for everything. And, you know, it's, of course, you know, a person's faith, you know, it can bring good things to their lives, but I think we started to realize maybe talking to the pastor isn't the same as, or talking to the imam or talking to whoever, maybe that's not the same as talking to a professional. So I'm happy that, you know, maybe we started these conversations and we looked at, you know, some of our parents and our elders, and we could see what was happening. We could see that they weren't all the way right or mentally healthy. But we also saw that how these things can kind of manifest if they're allowed to fester. So again, I'm happy that, you know, we're able to have these discussions, but it's just taken a lot of work to get there. So now many of us, you know, Generation Xers, even us, even a lot of us are going back and we're saying like, man, I need to talk to somebody, you know, about, you know, some things that happened today, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So you know, it's you know, it's never too late, you know, to start addressing your mental health. And again, I'm glad that it's become such a priority for, you know, generations that come after us. You know, we have a lot to learn from, you know, looking at generations before us, and certainly we have a lot to learn from generations that come after us.
Right on, Prince.
Thank you. Hastasia?
It's really funny because my generation specifically, we are recognizing that, like, you know, we need help and it's okay to seek out that help, but that doesn't mean that people are any less judgmental of people who go through stuff like that. The biggest thing from what I've seen just personally in my life, you still get judged. I have an uncle with schizophrenia. The problem is that psychology isn't a requirement. That's the problem. People don't understand, you know, the different things that go on because it's not something that you just have to know. People don't think that it's something that you should know. And I think it absolutely is something that you need to know if you're actually going to understand what you're going through, or, you know, why you feel a certain way, stuff like that. It comes down to a lot of things. And if we don't recognize or know, you know, the different signs and symptoms, we're just quick to say, oh, you know, my friend don't want to hang out with me, whatever, she's acting weird. But if you know somebody, you really know your family, you know that something's going on with them. And rather than being there to support them, we're quick to say, oh, you're a buzzkill. Oh, you're being lame. You're weird. You're whatever. So there's still a long way to go with that conversation, specifically for our community. But people are saying it's okay to get help, but people aren't saying that it's, you know, the conversation is not normalized. So it's just too much, I guess. I don't know, there's too much judgment into it. And it's really frustrating because you know that if you specifically went through something like, I mean, I've had severe depression, suicidal tendencies, all that good stuff. But like, I mean, when I was going through that, I could tell that I wasn't myself. And I mean, I could tell when other people weren't themselves, but it's not easy to kind of talk about it because it's taboo in our community. Like, it's like, oh, that's something small, you'll get over it, you know, distract yourself with something else. The conversation just, there's no way to really describe how or what even is going on with mental health in our community because nobody wants to sit down long enough to actually talk about it. And then when we do talk about it, everybody's like, you can explain 50,000 times to somebody that you know, you have anxiety or depressed, whatever, and people still won't understand it because they're not taught what those things are and what, you know, the symptoms, the things that come with it. Nobody knows that stuff. Again, it's not a requirement. But I just hope that the, you know, energy shifts on that, because I would hate to have to see one of my younger siblings go through, you know, depression, anxiety, any of that, schizophrenia, be diagnosed with anything. In my family, they're quick to judge you. I know that firsthand. They did it to me. They do it to my uncle. They do it to everybody. And it's really sad how strangers on the internet are more compassionate than the people who are in front of you every day. And I think that a lot of people feel as though people kind of overshare on the internet. And, you know, they kind of put their business out there, but it's also a way for people to talk their things out, because therapy is not cheap. Okay, $200 an hour, I'm not paying that. I'm sorry, you guys, that we have childhood traumas that we're recognizing as an actual trauma, and we can't fix it if we can't pay for it. And one of the biggest things that are huge in the community, we tend to go on, become doctors, lawyers, psychologists, but don't bring the resources back to who actually needs it. And it's the people right there in front of us. We see it every day. So it's like, you know, I can go on and be a nurse all day long and go on and be a doctor, a lawyer, but if my services aren't something that's gonna, you know, doesn't financially make sense for the people who need it, why am I doing it? So I just hope and pray that the conversation kind of shifts from, oh, it is what it is, to a requirement. As you sit down, you learn these things. This is how you can, you know, the steps you can take. And I guess we can kind of blame that on psychology being a newer discipline, but it's just really sad to see, you know, just people everywhere disrespecting, putting down, you know, just judging people for things that they literally cannot control. It is not them. And it breaks my heart to even have to have this conversation. Like, that's not them. It's not them. You know, that's straight chemical imbalances in your brain. The conversation just has to shift. We can't move forward if nobody's, you know, putting forth the effort to actually learn the stuff that they need to learn.
Thank you for that. Candid.
Okay, so this is our final subject, is social change. How did your family feel about protesting during your generation? And to what extent did you and Black families you know engage in protesting?
You know, the baby boomers were at the forefront of marches in the 60s and 70s for civil rights. You know, I can remember being in Texas marching, and they had the fire hoses at us. They had the dogs barking at us. The billy clubs were beating the hell out of us, you know, but we kept marching. And Dr. King came down and we marched with him. And then we followed him to Washington for the Million Man March, all right, that we still see great memories of. The thing that brought tears to my eyes is that 50 some years later, my granddaughter, Caitlin, in Texas, had to march again and get the same kind of treatment that I got 50 some years ago when she marched for the Black Lives Matter. We got to do better in terms of change, guys. You know, it's the same thing 50 years ago that it is today. And I'd like to think that we made progress, but statistically, I'm not sure.
Thank you.
You know, I second that. I do remember the Million Man March, and I remember just being witness, you know, to injustices. And I think our generation X, you know, we saw, you know, the marching in the 60s, and we certainly appreciated it. But we also saw you know, the FBI and COINTELPRO kind of, you know, dismantle a lot of these movements. All right. And another thing with my generation, Mr. Kimball's generation and beyond, you know, they marched for us, you know, so we didn't have to endure, you know, the same struggle they did. And, you know, I'm you know, there was some, you know, prosperity or some progress, but I think in my generation, we had the crack era, right? And that turned into, you know, mass incarceration. You know, so that's kind of what we were contending with. And I know a lot of people in my peer group, we were either directly affected or someone we knew, you know, was affected by, you know, just contact with the criminal justice system. All right. So, you know, and that, you know, kind of, I don't know, maybe deterred, you know, a lot of protesting in my generation. And I think as well, when it comes to a personal level, my mom and people, who raised me were, they told me, protest by getting an education and then going to contribute, right? Protest by building, building your community, or, learn and show what you learned. All right. But I do, second, Mr. Kimball's thought that, growing up, and I heard from my parents, we marched and we had other forms of protest. But, my mom still had to give me the speech, about, how to deal with police, or, always don't give them what they expect. Don't give them what they expect. Or it was kind of like, you still have to be better. You have to be, it's an adage I know many Black children heard, especially in my generation. You have to be twice as good to get to the same place. So, it was, and I think also, protest was in our music, and in our art. So I think just that spirit of, carrying on this legacy was, kind of bound to our generation. But I think with, millennials and Gen Z persons, it's, in some ways, my heart breaks as well, because it's like, or, even in my own experiences, why can my grandfather, my father, and me, and unfortunately my nephew who's 11, why can we all tell stories about similar experiences? Right now, are my stories identical to my grandfather's? Of course not. Okay, and my father's? Of course not. But I think like the same overarching, theme of, living in a society that's, going to judge you and possibly, assault you or even murder you based on the color of your skin, or you won't have access, to the same resources, as people with different skin tones. I think, that has always existed. And it's sad, that, like I said, my 11-year-old nephew and my 15-year-old daughter are going to have to, deal with some of these same issues. But what I do like about, Gen Z and millennials is, they're out there, and, they see, some of the protests and some of the strategies we used in the past, and they're like, thanks, but now it's our turn to take the baton. And, we're going to protest in our own way.
You two pretty much answered it. Like, nothing's changed. We're still out here marching, protesting. The only thing that I can honestly say is different between, like, Gen Z and millennials, baby boomers and Gen X, we have social media now. That's the only thing. So everybody's being recorded doing something. There's different ways to put yourself out there on the internet. There's always some way to see something, be involved with something, just be active. And we, like you said, we're still here marching, protesting, and ain't nothing changing. Nothing has changed. If we're being honest, like last summer to now, nothing changed. We're still, nothing changed. It's so tiring because, I can't imagine what it feels like for the previous generations to, like you guys said, you're still out here watching people that come after you do the exact same thing. And it may not be the same scenario as you all. Obviously, it's not the same scenario, but it's like we're still talking about the same things. We're still fighting for the same things. We're still begging for the same things. And it's like, it's tiring because like what's it gonna happen for me? Am I gonna be sitting here when I'm 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, and then my kids are out here still marching, protesting, screaming, my grandkids are out here still doing the same things? It's sad. And I kind of touched base on that in one of our previous events when we did Strange Fruit. And just thinking about, the generation to come after me, do I even want to have kids? It's like, what's the point of continuously producing and populating a planet or a country, a place that doesn't even care about you? It's intimidating, actually. It's it's sad. It's overwhelming. It actually also has an impact on your mental health, but again, we don't talk about that. So I mean, it's just a never ending cycle at this point. Nobody, it's sad. It's just so sad. There's nothing to say. Like, there's no reason why all three panelists on this, for this discussion have all experienced the exact same thing with that. It's really no reason why it should even still be happening. And then the worst part about it, I think people tend to forget that the March on Washington was not that long ago. Like, those people are still alive. So many people are still alive. Like, Ruby Bridges is still alive. Like, come on. It's just so sad. And like we were kind of talking about in our last event, those things are kind of, I guess people get desensitized to it. And, it just doesn't seem like something that happened so recently because everything was portrayed in black and white and produced and, just copied in black and white. It's still really hard to find colored images of anybody from the civil rights movement on the internet, which actually blows my mind because there's no reason why I should have, this idea that those things happened so long ago. And I just hope that, with technology and how things are changing and with, how people are being a different kind of activist now in, my generation and the generations to come, I just hope that one day we don't have to keep fighting, screaming, being quiet, marching, being peaceful. I'm rioting, all that good stuff. Like, it's just, I really hope one day it can stop. But as we see, the momentum isn't even slowing down. We're still doing the same things.
Anastasia, I gotta tell you, I have a ray of hope. What I saw in Black Lives Matters, when I saw the volume of non-Blacks participating, that gave me a hope for a brighter future. All right, that's something. Now, we did have non-whites marching back when I came up. Matter of fact, one of the young white women from Detroit died, all right, for trying to help us. But I saw so many young generation millennials and Ys and Zs marching for change, all right, that were non-Black. That gave me a ray of hope for a bigger, better, and a brighter future for all of us. Okay.
I guess to kind of add to that, my biggest thing is to see change, you have to be consistent. And we're consistent for like a month, and then we kind of drop off of the face of, the whole thing. And as we've seen way back when, things are going on for months, years at a time, and we're not really good at keeping momentum of movements. And it doesn't really help that I'm still actually working on an interview about this. And the only reason why it's still sitting in my email is because I don't necessarily know how to explain Black Lives Matter. Because as an organization, I don't agree with Black Lives Matter as an organization, but as a movement, I do agree with it. And it's really hard to kind of explain that to people. So it makes it really difficult to, continue to have this ray of hope when it takes 2 days for people to become uninterested. I just wish that the conversation could keep going, and it takes more than just one person. And I love having allies. It's really amazing just like how many people, even organizations at OCC, were just like, oh yeah, we're gonna go to this protest, we're gonna do this, we're gonna have this event. And it's so nice to see it, and it's so nice to hear those things, but it'd be a lot better to see the action behind it. And as much as I love, fighting for change, even just here at OCC, I'm tired. Okay, I am exhausted. It's like things can change. I believe that they can change, but it doesn't change when we're not consistent. And consistency is very hard to keep up in this day and age.
Well, where do we stand, Beth?
I think we're gonna, thank you. First of all, thank you so much. That was engaging, it was candid, it was forthright. And, you know, although we didn't all know what were gonna come out of your statements today, I think the discussion really leads us to where we wanted it to happen today, is to put this in the forefront of all of our thinking, and so that we can begin to make a difference. So I thank all of you for your opportunity for us to listen and learn and become better informed, so that we can hopefully all make changes. And I heard, you know, one word I heard Anna say a couple of times was about being tired. And you know, it is tiring when things don't happen quickly and they don't happen at the speed, but hopefully experiences like getting the information out is going to be one way that we can all move in that direction to help make things better. So thank you all for that. And we do want to now try to move to some questions. We have a special guest at the end, so we want to try to move to some questions if we can switch gears here. So we have the first question is Gen X is latchkey, right? Not sure.
You know, a lot of us were unsupervised after school. But the flip side of that is, you know, we still had parks and we had places we could go play. And I don't know, maybe I was just naive, but you know, I used to just my friends, we just go ride our bikes. And now it's, you know, parents walk the kids to the park. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but it was just a different, you know, I guess a different level of supervision, because, you know, a lot of our parents or our guardians, you know, we got out of school at 3, but parents don't get off of work till 5. So it was just, you know, just don't burn the house down. Okay.
And just a comment for Quincy from one of our participants. Quincy, your mom is and was awesome. Great way to make a punitive action productive.
Oh yeah.
So comment about your statements about your mom there. Another question, does fear of judgment keep people from reaching out for help?
Ooh,
And
yeah.
it might be for Anna.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Just from my personal experience, when I was at Wayne State, I actually did try to reach out for help. The only issue that's different here is that I wasn't believed. Like they just straight up told me that I was tripping, but like I couldn't be tripping if I'm not eating for a week at a time and I don't sleep, I don't go to class. So yeah, it was just more or less, I was afraid about what other people would think. And then when I was finally comfortable to reach out, not being believed also kind of pushed me away from wanting to reach out for help again. So I kind of had to do my own healing. And yeah, it was a long story, but that's definitely what made me who I am today.
Oh, thank you. And just a comment, someone thanked you, Anastasia, for your honesty about your mental health, making a statement about how we clearly need it to be visible. And then a question, if social media existed when Mr. Kimball was growing up, how might that have accelerated progress for African Americans? Mr. Kimball?
Well, a whole lot. You know, all the beatings that we went through back then probably would have stopped. You know, we didn't really get a lot of visibility in being punished until we saw Rodney King, and that was the first steps of social media. And when people saw that, they became engaged and they wanted to get involved and they wanted to change that was necessary to stop it. But like Anastasia says, that I mean, the Rodney King change came, and before you know it, it was over. And now we're starting all over again. You know what I mean? So it has to be consistent on a long-term basis. And yeah, but social media, man, we had it back then. They would have saw some very, very terrible things, like hangings, all right? Like tar and feathering, all right? So it was kind of bad back then, but you guys got your issues here too today. We don't stand on the back of people and smother them to death. Okay.
Oh,
Just
thanks.
to go a little, just a quick comment. I think Anna and Mr. Kimball are right. I think people kind of have this perception of like racially motivated violence, you know, being this new phenomenon, but it's always been there. It's you could even make a strong argument that it's in the DNA, you know, of the United States. But I think sort of towards the you know, my generation, we kind of started to record, but I think now, you know, everyone has, you know, a recording device. So it is my hope, you know, that even though it is painful to kind of see like images of yourself, you know, being beaten, you know, being tortured, being murdered, but I think sometimes as a nation, we have to find it within us, you know, to bear witness to these things. We can't keep, you know, operating in a state of kind of being oblivious.
Thanks for that. And I think an important question, what can white people do to help promote better outcomes for individuals and families of color besides joining Black Lives Matter protests? All three of you
Straight
probably.
up, speak up, say something. You know when something is wrong. We all know right and wrong. We know the differences. If you see something wrong and you know somebody's not, you know, if they're being some type of way, whatever, say something to them. We can't say nothing. They're not gonna listen to us. Being an ally is more than, like you said, going to protest. In your everyday lives, people say all types of things, and it's not hard to correct them. It's not hard to stop them. You know, if you lose a friend, so what? Who cares? I mean, it's like, if you care about something, you're going to be an ally about it. Be serious in everyday life. Don't just go on social media. Correct people. That's straight up the best way to do it. Speak up.
Amen. Thank you.
And just to piggyback off of that, I think you know, my Caucasian friends and family could start having more conversations among each other. Meaning, don't wait for an event or don't wait to be prompted, you know, by a person of color. Because when you think about it, when we look at white supremacy, it's kind of a function of white privilege to put the burden on Black people to dismantle this system that we did not create. So I think like taking a more proactive approach and kind of not waiting to have these discussions, and to, again, you know, to follow up on what Anna so brilliantly said, you know, conversations are great, but, you know, action is better.
Yeah, thank you.
Action has to be in the form of policy changes.
Yes.
But we can talk and talk and talk, but until there's a difference in regulations, a difference in policy, and a difference in punishing those that break those policies and break those regulations, nothing's going to change.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. We have some comments, a couple of comments here too, to thanking you all for sharing your experiences, that the conversation is awesome and right on point for all the generations. Same thing, not acknowledging how much openness and bringing that out, your passion out to all of us to enlighten us about similarities and differences. Quick question for Anastasia. Do you think that today's Black sitcoms are made for non-Black viewers to understand? And they said, I used to love watching Grownish, and now I kind of stopped watching.
Yes and no. I really think that with entertainment and TV, we tend to directly relate everything that goes on to what they say, you know, things like that. And I think it's important to really separate what's on TV from reality, and to make sure, you know, it's just a conversation that they're trying to, you know, get out there. It's not so much, oh, this is exactly how it is. This is exactly what they mean. It still takes, you know, you have to know, because in a way they do kind of help to where other people understand you know, the Black experience, but I don't think that they don't really portray on everyday life. Like, it's very, like Norwood said, the Cosby's like this picture perfect family. And like I said earlier, my family's dysfunctional. I can't even relate to more than half the stuff that's on TV, to be honest. Like, so yes, no, I guess if you want to have this picture perfect ideology of what the Black family and, you know, what everything is, then sure, you know, it's a good way to use it, but it's not the perfect tool, if that makes sense.
Thank you. And thanks for all the questions and comments. I don't think we have time to get to everything because we do have to move the program along here. We have one more speaker that we have that's going to help us out today.
All right, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon. This has been an outstanding panel. First, I wanted to say thank you to the Auburn Hills Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Justice Committee for inviting me here to give some comments. I also want to thank, I almost want to call you my OCC Black Student Union, but I can't call you that yet because we're all virtual and I haven't gotten a chance to see anybody but the few people that are on this line. Thank you, Anastasia, for your passionate comments, your honesty, and thank you for sharing some deep comments with everyone. I don't know how many people are here. Quincy, thank you for representing my generation. And of course, Biggie's Ready to Die album is on my top 5. So, and a lot of the experiences you talk about are the same that I had. And to Mr. Kimball, you represent the generation that began the fight. As far as I have parents that are baby boomers, so we appreciate what you've done and all of your forthright comments during this panel discussion. So thank you all. This is outstanding. This is a wonderful presentation that I've seen. So I wanted to move forward and really just tell you all that, you know, I was born and raised in Flint, and a lot of these issues that have come forth have affected both me and everyone in the African-American community. It was good to see that the conversation went from education, entertainment, mental health, social change, and all of those things were incorporated. So I agree, Anastasia, sometimes we get stuck on social change, but it is something that will allow us to continue to enjoy our music, to have a excellent education, to seek mental health wherever we want it. And so social change is something that I think we really have to look at as a way to move forward the Black community. So we've all seen, as Mr. Kimball talked about, the Rodney King beating, but more recently, George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, the impact and the consequences of seeing what occurred and the circumstances behind their death has impacted us all, both Black, white, Latino, and other. So what I would charge everyone to do is to keep pushing for reform, to keep pushing for social justice initiatives that allow us to see change. So I know that's not where you want to go, Anastasia, but it's where I felt we needed to go. So Mr. King talked about the 50s and 60s and the civil rights era, but we do know that we have continuously, as you cited, my grandmother said it. She said, this is pretty much the same thing we've gone through. And it just continues. So we have to continue to fight and to keep pushing. So I have a message just to my students who I haven't met yet. And I call you my students, although I think Mr. Kimball and Quincy own you really because they have been here much longer than me, but I can't wait to meet you all. To my students, never stop pushing and pursuing your dreams. Never stop pushing for social justice. A lot of times I remember a lot of people, we used to call them haters in my generation or naysayers in other generations, would almost make it feel like you could not achieve your dreams. So Don't allow those folks to get you down. There's always a place to seek help. You can come to me, you can come to a faculty member, you can come to someone that you feel will help you when you are not feeling like you are succeeding. So I wanted to also say to everyone else on the line that, in particular, my OCC employees, I need your involvement. Faculty and staff, I need your involvement. I need your participation in committees. We have a DEI committee where there have been some participants there for years. I need input on what has occurred at OCC, where we need to go. So get involved in a committee. Basically, my message is get involved. A DEI committee, a DEI strategic planning committee, or just participate in these types of programs and support these types of programs. Next, and lastly, I would say to the members of the general public, volunteer with an organization. Particularly if you are concerned about issues, volunteer for an organization that is pushing social justice, that is backing social reform. Don't allow your voice to, you see all this on TV, but you don't take any action. Get involved. And so that is my message to everyone here that I can't see, by the way, but hopefully that'll change soon. But I wanted to simplify what I want to accomplish at OCC. First, I want to have a strategic plan. It can be a one-year plan at first, but overall a 5-year plan. And Anastasia, I hope you will bring students along to let me know what you guys need. And then I know I can depend on Mr. Kimball and the professors to tell me, and all the rest of the folks who are here who have been part of the OCC community. So a 5-year strategic plan, but we will start with a 1-year strategic plan. And I want to hold myself accountable as well as everyone else accountable. So we have to have some measurable goals, some measurables, and some indicators that show that we're improving. Second, I want to build a diversity team that includes other members other than just me who will address all of these issues. So soon you'll hear an announcement that we'll be hiring, making another hire related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'll build out a team and I'll make everyone aware of that. But overall, my goal is to have transformative change at OCC. And as somebody just said, I don't know if it's Mr. Kimball, Quincy, or Anastasia, the real thing is to have some action. So we always have all these plans. We always have all this stuff sitting on the shelf. The main thing is some action. So I won't feel like I'm a success unless we have some actionable items that are accomplished. So I want to keep it brief. I want to keep it short. Reach out to me anytime via email. You can give me a phone call. If my Black Student Union people are on here, my students, give me a call, give me an email. For my faculty, give me an email. For my staff at OCC, give me an email. I want to reach out and we can talk. So, and I also need to know about these kinds of events. I don't know about all these kinds of events, and I want to try and correct that with my staff as we build a team, but invite me to all these events. I want to be there. So in closing, I'm extremely humbled to be here. I'm extremely honored to speak to you all, and I look forward to meeting you all once COVID clears and meeting you all via the virtual Zoom platform. So thank you for having me, and I look forward to working with you all.
Mr. Popular,
Yes, sir.
man, now I know where I've seen that face at Trinity Baptist Church.
I've seen your face too, but I couldn't remember where.
We were both of us, in fact, and we go to church. All right.
Okay, yes.
I am so happy to have you in this new position. And what's the big title now that you bring to the OCC campus? Title?
Oh, you talking about my title? Oh, my title is Vice Chancellor of Human Resources and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yes, sir.
I'm happy to hear that. That's a big title with me.
Yeah, and I'm going to try and fill another one right under me that addresses diversity, equity, and inclusion. So
there you go.
So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you. So yeah. I compliment Pete for making that choice to take higher level position up to make sure we do have diversity and inclusion. So welcome.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And so I have an open door. So, one of my, my staff members, told me, don't keep telling people you have an open door, but I do have an open door. And, over time, those folks that open your door, it'll measure out, but it's okay to open my door and reach out to me. So,
Great.
all right.
Well, thank you. And forgive our faux pas in this virtual world that we're in. And thank goodness your name appears there. Desiree had an introduction. She was going to actually introduce you. So do you want to introduce him, Desiree? Oh, can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can.
I feel like he already introduced himself when Mr. Thomas asked him what his role was.
Sorry to have stole your thunder, Desiree.
It's okay.
And you know what, Desiree, I wasn't sure if I was just supposed to start speaking and so yeah, I apologize. I guess an introduction would have worked. And so thank you for your involvement on this panel too. And thank you, Beth, for reaching out to me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like I said, in the virtual world, it's a little tough without making eye contact. We're doing it at a distance. But for sure, we want to thank you for those closing remarks and for joining us today. And especially to our three panelists for being honest and insightful and giving the narratives that are going to help all of us, especially during Black History Month, which should not just be a month. And we hope that the event that we've shared with all of you today that has provided the insight and the inspiration to go deeper and create some understanding and time for reflection based on the stories that you've heard today and go forward and do more. I think to ad lib on his words, just do more.
Okay.
So, and on behalf of the Auburn Hills Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice Committee, thank you all for joining us today, and we wish you well. And I think, Ms. Tate, you have some closing comments as well.
We hope that during this time of separation, we'll get through this and we'll soon be able to be with each other again. And have a nice day.
All right.
Thank you.
From Black Student Union.
Everybody.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Take care.
All right.